Well, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm just keeping busy. We're ramping up to release this album, and it's like there was nothing for so long, and now all of a sudden it's like everything, go now.
Less than
So
2 weeks away now, so
I
congrats.
know.
Very exciting.
Oh, it's like real now. We're actually this is my actual basement in the background, and we've been like kind of just basement going over parts and just making sure because we're gonna be playing a lot of these new songs out live for the very first time, and it's like it's exciting. It's also like nerve wracking, but it's great. It's good to be busy.
For sure. So I know a lot of other artists, they say that when they're about to release a new album and it goes from becoming yours to the rest of the world, some of them kind of find it like bittersweet. Do you resonate with that, or do you have like different feelings about that experience?
I actually I don't find it bittersweet at all. I think that that's the next evolution of the song. That's kind of where it is able to transform and have a life of its own. A great example is some of our early songs, like from the first album, whatever. If we're here in the basement and we're rehearsing, I'm like, oh God, this song again, right? But every single time, it's you stand up on stage and the song is no longer yours, it's theirs, and so it kind of breathes new life into it. And then also I'm excited specifically for this album and for people to hear it, because I have predictions as to where all those moments are going to happen in the audience, and I want to see if I'm right. But also, I mean, subject matter wise and lyrically, I I know that whether it's our diehard super fans, or if you're listening to Halestorm for the first time on this album, you're going to be able to see yourself in a lot of these songs. I mean, for heaven's sake, the album comes out in 2 weeks, and there's already people that have the lyrics for our first two singles tattooed on them. It's like the album isn't even out yet, so I'm excited for it to be theirs. I am.
That's crazy. All right. Well, I just have a little, I want to backtrack a tiny bit before we actually get into the album. All right. So obviously, inevitably have to touch on COVID a little bit, the pandemic. You're a band that tours so frequently. So how did you kind of like handle that downtime personally, not being able to go on the road?
Oh my gosh. It was really hard at times. Like and sometimes scary, because I mean, I've been in this band since I was 13 years old, which actually on August 9th this year will be 25 years from the very first Hailstorm show,
Woo!
which is really weird to say, by the way. Still doing it, still doing the same thing. But I've been in this band longer than I haven't been in this band. So it's so much more than a quote unquote career choice. I mean, the fact that I can even call it a career now, and it is like a perk. I'd still be doing it. But I what you don't realize when everything is suddenly stolen from you, how much of those weapons and those things that you have, whether it be a live show or just your camaraderie with your fans, or your being with your bandmates, the traveling, that you don't realize how many of those tools that you use to combat your own mental health and combat the darkness that can kind of creep in. So I had somewhat of an identity crisis when everything stopped, because I am so much, this band is me. I mean, I've put so much of my life and my conscious thought and my mission statement and everything. So, without all of those things, you have to almost look at yourself and be like, okay, who am I without it? Who am I without the band? Who am I without the touring? Who am I without the forward movement? You almost like lose your purpose for a second. And really, I mean, if this album sounds a little angsty, it's because the only weapon in my arsenal was really just sitting my butt down and like, okay, we have to write through it. And so you got to channel it somewhere. You can't lay it all out on a stage one night. So we had to put kind of everything into uh, this album. But yeah, I guess the silver lining of it all too is that I did get to rediscover the why I write, the why I'm doing the things that I do. And it really is because I use that to put all the puzzle pieces together in my head, and to get over feelings and to get over things. So, I mean, that's the power of music. But it was really tough. Like I was missing all of those things, because this is my life. So, but I mean, again, the beautiful thing about coming out on the other side is that I, I've never taken anything for granted. We're very much a stop and smell the roses type band, but now it's just kind of a different world. Whereas I am literally living every day in the moment, in the now. When I'm on stage, I'm absorbing everything. I'm looking at everybody. I'm not preoccupied so much anymore with like the tiny mistakes that go by or whatever. Like I used to be like really, gung ho about that, and now it's just about playing every show like it's your last. It's and I see that with the audience too. I see that with people in the crowd. They're going to every show like it's going to be stolen from them again. And I think that's a beautiful thing to just realize, okay, what are you in it for? What and why do you love this so much?
To touch on what you said about identity crisis, I know you also have said a couple times that there were moments where you felt like you were wondering if you even loved music anymore. So, did you
Yeah.
kind of have like an aha moment or like a process that you used to kind of like help re-spark your love for that and help you realize like, okay, yes, this is what I'm meant to do and I'm sure of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was when I decided, because I took a little bit of time, like there was a long period of time that like I didn't pick up a guitar. I wasn't sitting down to write songs, um, and just had this almost like moment of fear of like, am I going to love this again? Like, can I go over and can I pick this up? Can I sit at the piano and can I get through this? And I kind of I had to force myself into it, because it was almost like, well, I'm going to try to sit down, and all of these feelings that I'm having, I'm going to try to figure them out through writing, like the way I used to do it when I was 14, and um, almost as a last hurrah, as in like if I get in this and I force myself into it, and I just let's just finish things. Let's draft and redraft. Let's try to get like, so I ended up kind of putting together, just a bunch of different like just things that I am passionate about, maybe the things that I was missing, that weren't there anymore. And I just would sit and I would draft and redraft these subject matters, and then when I finally sat down, I'm like, well, if I get through this and I really am not feeling this, and it's just not there anymore, then I have to reevaluate my entire life. And the wonderful thing was that once I got a couple things songs under my belt, and I really started to feel that feeling again where you just get lost in it, and time doesn't matter and the world doesn't matter. This is now your mission, and it was almost like breathing new life, into this thing that I know I used to love so much, but it did, because by writing the song, and then when you finally know it's kind of finished, and even if it's in demo form or whatever, you can kind of put that aside, and it's almost like you've accomplished something and you've worked your way through it, and be like, okay, I don't have to think about that for a while. I've put that in, I've put that in the box, and now, don't look at it now. Let's move on to the next thing. And so, like, really, again, had to write myself through it, and then it was very emotional, because then afterward, and especially after certain songs, like I just, I'm more emotional these days than I think I used to be anyway. But, I would sit there and I would just like, I would just cry, because I'm like, okay, all right, I have a purpose. Let's just make this the purpose, and then just to see, most of those songs come to life, on this album. That was another emotional release, because then it became like, okay, it's real. We're getting the band back together again. We're gonna actually do this. And funny tidbit actually about this album, we did it in kind of the opposite sense, because we had to. I recorded all of my vocals, my keeper vocals, what you're hearing on the album, first. To the demos that we had. And then when we finally got into the studio, we built up the tracks around my vocals. So it was really interesting to like hear that too, because I was reminded of this fact that like, oh wow, so my subjects and my lyrics and my voice are kind of leading the charge here and inspiring most of the music that we're creating around it. And that was crazy too, because then I'm like, wow, all right, I got this. I know who I am again, you know? So it was, yeah, it was definitely a roller coaster ride. And this would have been a very different album if the world had stayed the same. So, yeah.
Now that you guys had to kind of adapt to a different way of creating an album, do you think that you would take any of those tactics going into, you know, a couple years from now into the next cycle, or would you rather like go back to the way you were doing it before COVID? I know you call it BC, before COVID.
I know. I'm a cheese ball at heart. The dad jokes are very much alive in Halestorm. But I think I'd like to utilize some of those things. You know, again, I will probably approach all of my demos from here on out like they're going to be keeper takes, you know, because that's kind of that to me, that was really inspiring when we got to the, so I think that what I've learned is to not necessarily hold back just because it's a demo, you know, like not wait, be like, oh, well, when I get in the studio, then I'll really go for it. You know, I don't think I'll ever, you know, that, really have that mindset again from the before, you know, and so that's a good thing. I think I'll take that into the next project. But one thing I did miss, about the way that we just start, you know, writing for a record is, you know, really jamming with my band and coming up with the instrumentals, you know, sometimes, you know, on our last record, we did that a lot. We had a lot of instrumentals that then I would take and write over top of, and so I don't know, I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a combo platter, but I'm excited about that too, because, you know, through all of this, we've learned a lot about ourselves, you know, that maybe we wouldn't have addressed if everything had stayed the same. So I'm looking forward to whatever comes next, given now the new tools in our tool belt.
What
awesome.
Would you say musically are the biggest differences between Vicious and Back from the Dead?
Vicious, I think we were more experimental with the way that we were arranging the songs. And it was kind of like this feeling of almost recklessness. Whereas on this album, there was more of a mission, like, and on this album, on Back from the Dead, everybody came in to the studio on 11, because even when we were in the studio and we were recording these songs, we didn't know whether we were going to ever play them out live. So we left no stone unturned. And, you know, as far as we have to make sure, you know, the guitar leads are crazier. We got to make sure that the drumming is manic, and, you know, I got to sing harder, you know, all of these things that, we weren't necessarily thinking on Vicious. We were kind of letting the music lead. And, so for this album, I think it's very cohesive. It's probably one of our more cohesive records, probably since the second album, probably since The Strange Case of Halestorm, because you can see how everything kind of relates to it. And I don't know whether that is because, you know, I did all the vocals first and we kind of, you know, again, I was spearheading the operation, or just because, you know, we had a different mindset. But yeah, it's so funny how every single album you could go into it thinking, oh, we're just going to do the same thing as the last album. And it's almost like halfway through the music tells you what to do. And it's like, no, that's not the plan. This is where we're going. So yeah, I don't know. It's that with the next one, who knows where we'll go. But yeah, with Vicious, it was really interesting because we were doing all these, we were literally jamming instrumentally and made all these kind of like very like almost like as a big middle finger to like, to, you know, conform to like, you know, okay, here's songs for radio and whatever. We were almost just saying screw all of that. And so, yeah, we were being quite reckless on Vicious. And I think that here we had more of a, again, like I said, like more of a mission statement, like, okay, we have to make sure everything is tight and there's nothing that we would go, about, you know? So, yeah.
So one similarity I noticed between the two is that they both start with like these really massive, like powerful tracks, and they both ended with more tender moments. The Silence was on Vicious, and So Razorhorns, I'm assuming, is named after that social media movement you started a couple of years ago. Can you talk a little bit about like what inspired you to start that hashtag and if that's changed at all for you now that the whole world has kind of gone through a mental health crisis in a communal way?
Absolutely. I mean, I started that campaign kind of on a whim. It was shortly after Jill Janis from Huntress took her life, and I just felt really helpless about it, and especially when you know someone and and they have this, hidden darkness that you didn't even know, and then you think, oh man, should I have reached out? Those kind of things, and I started talking about it with my guys, and I think it was my little brother who was like, well, but everybody has been touched, by mental health in some way, like whether it's yourself or or someone that and so it was kind of on a whim. I just kind of put it out there online, to hashtag raise your horns, take a picture of yourself raising your horns if you have ever been in that situation, and it kind of took on a mind of its own. And it was this beautiful example of how none of us are alone in that. None of us. And so then from there, it kind of became this strange, mission of mine to like keep that phrase with that, but not have it, it is synonymous with like, oh, metal, but it just means so much more to me now. And then when I started writing the song Raise Your Horns during lockdown. And I remember I was on FaceTime with the guys in my band, and I'm just like, okay, I have this really weird idea. I'm writing the song on piano, and it's called Raise Your Horns, but we're not going to have any drums or bass or guitar, and it's probably going to confuse the hell out of people because they'll see the title and think it's going to be a banger, and it's totally not. But I wanted to reflect what that phrase meant to me, and technically, and I just actually found this out, and apparently I've been using it in the right way, but the term raise your horns literally means to exalt oneself. And so I wanted to really reflect that on the song and just kind of show people that like, hey, you need to own your weird. There is that darkness that is going to happen, but we are all the same. And just as a reminder of that. And so when that song was finished, we kind of always knew it was going to be the last one on the album because it's just a nice way to send everybody off. But that is funny how that is the similarity. I didn't even think about that, but that's exactly what we did on Vicious.
I mean, the hard-hitting Halestorm is always like so in your face and so powerful and has such a strong impact. But I also I feel like you guys' tender moments and you playing the piano, like for some reason, it just strikes a different chord. All right, but we got to wrap up on this last one. So you said that you guys are planning on obviously playing a couple of these songs on tour. This is kind of a weird question, but do you guys ever like write songs for an album and like think, oh, we might not ever actually play this live? Or do you kind of always go in with the idea that there's always going to be a point where one of those songs is going to be played?
I feel like we always go in thinking something's going to find its place. And then there are songs that we have, maybe performed once or twice on stage and we're like, this isn't the one for the set. It's not, because there are certain songs that lend themselves more toward the recording and less toward a live moment. But I think that there's always that, we go into it having hope that like each one is going to find their place on a stage. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's, now listening to the record in its entirety, part of the reason why the sequence is the way it is A, to take you on a ride, because like you were saying before, and this is selfish on my part, if I'm going to be screaming my head off in this song, I'm going to have to show you the opposite end of the spectrum. But we did the sequence kind of like if we were to play the entire album out live, how would we put it into a set? And how would we arrange the set list? So I don't know. Yeah, we're going into this thinking, okay, every single one of these is going to have its place, and we're probably going to try every single one of them. So yeah, that has yet to be revealed, who the ugly duckling is.